Hi, welcome to my July wrap-up part 2 video. I read a total of 15 books in July across ebooks, physical and audio. And I actually had like a really good time in July. The books all seemed to be really good. There was nothing below 3 stars. I actually gave out 5 stars, 6 4 stars and 4 3 stars. Hopefully that adds up to 15. But yeah, so I had a really good month. The first book I'm going to tell you about is The Rule by David Jackson. I just want to say thank you so much to Serpent's Tail / Viper publishing company. They sent me like a widget on NetGalley for this book because I have previously read The Resident by David Jackson and really enjoyed that. These are thrillers, and this, I'll just start by saying that The Rule just completely blew me out of the water. Like, it felt like it was in a totally different league to his other book. His previous book I'd given 4 stars anyway, and there was like this easily got 5 stars, easily. This thriller is about a family who have an adult son who is disabled, mentally disabled, and he accidentally kills somebody. And the whole kind of book then is about the family who, like his parents, who decide to cover up the crime. And I guess it runs on the themes of like a diminished responsibility and how far we would go to protect our loved ones, and not just whether we would harbour a criminal or not tell somebody that our relative was a criminal, in specific relation to diminished responsibility. And I thought that was such a thought-provoking like take on the situation. It was just great. We had chapters from the dad's point of view, and the way it was written, I could absolutely feel the desperation of his dad, just like pouring out of the pages. Like, you know, the lengths he had to go to hide this crime, and he obviously then made himself a criminal. And stepping, like, as somebody who can like look from another perspective, you can see that they're not making the best choices, but then you can also understand why they're making the choices they are making. And the police end up on the trail of the killer, and things just get loads worse for the family. And then there's other people who are like involved. I can't tell you really because it'll just ruin different aspects of the book, but other people are involved who are also for their own motives looking for the killer, and it just ends up a hot mess. There are also chapters from the police detective's point of view, and she was really well written. She had suffered a tragedy not long before this, and it was like how that influenced her behaviour and her work and the choices that she made, and that again was really fascinating. I absolutely love, I couldn't put this all down. Absolutely loved it. Absolutely, definitely recommend it. Easy 5 stars. The next book I want to tell you about is Confessions of a First Time Mum by Poppy Dolan. Unsurprisingly, this book is about a first time mum and her confessions of how crap motherhood can sometimes be. So we follow Stevie, who is a first time mum, and she's got this newborn that she's suddenly got to look after and keep alive. and I specifically remember having that exact feeling of, oh my god, I've got to keep this child alive and it's reliant on me. And like throughout the whole book, it literally is just like first time experiences and sleep deprivation and feeding patterns and all the rest of the rubbish that you have to go through to enjoy motherhood. And I am a massive fan of this, like, I want to say current trend, but it's been a good few years now, of books where characters aren't perfect they're not horrendous, they're not neglectful parents, obviously, but they're not perfect. And I love how these books normalise the reality of parenting, and they kind of make us realise that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, that we aren't a bad parent because we aren't constantly, Instagram worthy and bloody baking cakes all the time and got our kids dressed in matching outfits and all that stuff. And I was able to relate to Stevie so much. She goes through some like times in her life in those first few months that, looking back now, as my children, my youngest is 7 and his brother is 12. So I feel like I can look back now and go, yeah, that wasn't a big issue, but I remember at the time feeling like it was a big issue. And so the character goes through things like that. So that made me get really invested in Stevie's story, and I kind of just wanted to like tell her in another few years she'd be looking back going, I can't believe I was worried about that. So I think that made it a little more enjoyable for me as well, being able to relate to the character. I loved her friends as well. She meets some other like parent friends at a group, and they kind of band together and face difficulties together. And I really, really loved that aspect. I wanted to have that kind of experience when I was younger and I had my kids, and it just didn't happen. But it was really nice seeing that somebody else went through it. And it was just, I thought this was like a really fun book, but also there was little touches on other things that new parents do experience that they might be worried about. So I thought this was like a really good book that you could give to somebody who is pregnant or who is a new mum. Not that they probably have time to read it as a new mum, but you know what I mean. And just like I said, normalise things. It was really, really interesting. I actually listened to the audiobook of it and I really enjoyed it. The narrator did a fantastic job. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Now, the next book I'm going to tell you about is not my normal kind of book. It was non-fiction, but it was called Childhood and Death in Victorian England by Sarah Seaton. Yeah, I'm not a history buff, to be honest. I'm not particularly interested in history. But it was just the title, and actually this cover like kind of dragged me in. How creepy is that? I couldn't not request it on NetGalley. Yes, it was interesting. There was a lot of I want to say like dry details and dry facts that kind of brought the enjoyment down a little bit for me. However, I did find it really fascinating how it was kind of split up into sections of the types of deaths that children had during Victorian times. And not in a really gruesome way, but in like, so there might be a section on diseases that children would have experienced at that age and why they died of those diseases, like the treatments that were available, things like that didn't work, obviously. And then there was like a section on like accidents, and a lot of it was talking about how back then children were left home alone from a very, very young age, literally from being toddlers, whilst the parents went out to work, and that's when a lot of accidents happened, or children left with siblings who were only a couple of years older than them. There was that. Then there was a section on like child deaths as in murder. That was particularly interesting because of the way that the murder investigation kind of was done, and the sort of trial that the suspected killer had. That was really fascinating. Obviously it's not nice. The whole book isn't nice. It's about children dying, but I did find different aspects really interesting to then kind of compare to what we have nowadays. And there was also a small part talking about the NSPCC and its kind of like development in society and how it came about and the things that it did back in those days. So yeah, it was interesting. It was just a little dry, a bit drier than I thought it would be. So I only ended up giving this 3 stars. Then we've got The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. I think I told you about my one-line summary for this book, and it was something like mum goes for a night out and never comes home kind of thing. And it kind of is, but it's much, much more than that. So we have Tallulah, who is 19 years old. She's got a young baby, as an actual baby. And her and a partner or a boyfriend, they go out for a night to the local pub and they just never come home. And the mum, Tallulah's mum is looking after her grandson for Tallulah, and she initially is like, you know, they've not come home, we need to start searching for him, but the police won't listen to her because they're like, well, they're adults and they do have a lot of pressure on them, so maybe they've just kind of run away for a day or two and just to escape things. But it kind of goes, like, drags on, obviously, and Tallulah's mum gets more and more concerned. And so we kind of see, we've got that bit of a timeline, and then we've also got the timeline in the current time where some guy gets the headmaster job at a private school in the time where the Tallulah disappeared. And his girlfriend who lives with him, she discovers like a sign on a tree or on a post that says dig here, and when she digs she finds something that kind of leads her to think it's related to the crime or the disappearance of Tallulah and her boyfriend. And then it kind of goes like that the whole way through the book, where you're following the previous timeline of what happened and you're seeing events. And it's not just the disappearance that you see a good few weeks prior and the build up and how Tallulah feels and how her boyfriend feels and other characters coming into it. And what I felt that did was it kind of gave you lots of possible, I want to say, like, not outcomes as such, but like theories of what happened. Or yeah, I suppose an outcome, like, depending on the theory you got, you could assume that they've just run away or something like that. And it gave you lots of different options to look at, and oh, maybe that happened, oh, maybe they did it, and all that, and that was really good. And then, like I said, the current timeline, you're following this woman who then decides to like try and investigate on her own, and she's trying to not get in people's way or upset people, and yeah, it was just really, really interesting. I don't know why, there was just something about this book that didn't hit 5 stars for me. I don't know, but I think maybe the chapters in the current time were a little less interesting than the other chapters, but on the other hand, they were needed, obviously, so I don't know. I did really like Tallulah as a character, and I was desperate for things to work out great for her, and, you know, obviously she disappeared. But yeah, so this ended up being 4 stars for me. Then we've got The Secret Midwife by Katie White. This is obviously a medical memoir by a midwife. I know you're all shocked, you would never have guessed that. It's anonymous, the whole book. So I'm just going to say she for it all. But Katie White is like the ghostwriter, so it's not Katie who the book is about. So the whole book is like a professional memoir from when this midwife was a student midwife right through to her leaving the NHS. And she talks, it was very interesting to look at the book as an overall, because what it kind of did was it started off really hopeful and joyful, and then it kind of, you could see gradually through the book that she was becoming more jaded and more dragged down, I guess, with the realities of nursing in the NHS at this current time. And I don't mean like 2021, I mean like over the last so many years. And that was really sad to see. But I saw it myself when I was nursing. I was mental health nurse, and I saw it myself. I could see over the space of the 11 years, you start off like, I'm gonna change the world, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna help loads of people, and there's been changes over the years with the NHS, we all know this, and cutbacks, and decisions being made by people who probably shouldn't be making those decisions because they're not the ones on the ground. And this is what she talks about. I loved all the case stories of the babies being born and the mum she's looked after, the different births that she went, she worked through, like multiple births and breech and high risk and all this stuff, and it was just really, really good. I absolutely loved that. I think I put a post on Instagram at the time of reading it. I think I got to like page 11. The first baby had been born, and I was already crying tears of joy at this baby being born. Babies being born gets me every time. So yeah, I had quite a tearful experience through this book, because almost every time a baby was born and they were healthy and everything was okay, I was like, oh. But yeah, so it's just not sunshine and rainbows. It's just not. And I feel like some people might be kind of upset by the book, because I think there's obviously some people out there, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but they don't want to know. They do not want to know the difficulties that goes on inside the healthcare system. They just want to know that it's there and they can rely on it if they need to. Whereas I have been in it and I know there's difficulties, so I like reading about other people's perceptions on those difficulties. It was just absolutely amazingly written, very engaging, very, very interesting. I think the topics she picked to discuss and the way she kind of demonstrated those with the case study, or the case that she worked on, was just absolutely spot on. I flew through this book. I couldn't put it down. 5 stars easy. So the next book that I want to tell you about is The Pact by Sharon Bolton. I mentioned this in my last video, I think, one of the videos, that I seem to be reading a lot of books, or coming across a lot of books that have got a very similar kind of overall plot, in that a group of teenagers commit a crime, agree to cover it up, and then, that secret keeping all goes wrong. So in this one, we've got a group of teenagers. They're awaiting their A-level results, so they are older teens, and they stupidly drive down a dual carriageway, I think it is, in the wrong lane, in the wrong direction, and so they think it's like thrilling for some reason, but there's an oncoming car, and the car has to swerve to avoid hitting them, and it crashes, and the family inside die. The group of teens decide to not report what's happened, and eventually it comes out, but one of the girls decides to take all the flack. She says it was just her in the car, she drove in the wrong direction for some stupid reason, she got lost or whatever, and she thinks, or the whole group agrees for her to take that responsibility, and they all think she'll kind of get in trouble for dangerous driving or something like that, and it won't be much of a punishment. Unfortunately, the girl gets charged with murder, and she does end up in jail for quite a number of years. Now, the story kind of then jumps to her release. I think it's about 20 years later. So they're all adults, they've all got their own lives. They are still in touch, this group, apart from they don't have anything to do with Megan, the girl who took the responsibility. And she is out for revenge once she gets out of prison. And that's like the whole kind of, you find out all that bulk of information right at the beginning of the book, and then the rest of the book is about her getting revenge, and members of the group start dying, and is it her or is it somebody else? Things like that. It was really, really gripping for someone. I don't know, like, considering it's like this trope or this plot that's been done quite a bit recently, I really did find myself gripped with this. The characters were all very, very unique. So it was, even though there was quite a large group of them, I think there was like 6 in total, even though there was a large group of them, they were all very easy to distinguish between because they all had very unique personalities. So I never got confused there, which was really, really good. And then also, the author had put in like so many twists and turns in this story. I could find out a bit of information in the book, and then you'd be like, I know what's happened. And then something else would happen, you're like, no, I now know what's happened. And then something else would happen, you're like, for God's sake, I have no idea what's going on, who the killer is, or who's like caused this to happen. It was a really, really fascinating read. I actually listened to it as an audiobook, and I like to listen to thrillers as audiobooks whilst I'm working, because sometimes it can be a little monotonous when I'm working, and like the thrillers kind of just get me through. And this was one of those. I really got caught up in it. I was looking forward to listening to it when I was working. And yeah, I ended up giving this 4 stars. Right, now, the last book that I want to tell you about today is The Gilded Cage by Lynette Nonny. And I know exactly what you are thinking. You are sat there thinking, but Bekah, why are you reading this book now? It's only due to be released in October. So what on earth are you doing? You normally read arcs after they're published. What are you doing being so early and prepared? Well, let me tell you, this book is the second in the series of the Prison Healer series. And literally as soon as I got the arc approved, I was like, I'm in it. There's no stopping me. I couldn't wait, because if you remember my wrap-up of, I think I read it, it was April, I think. Yeah, it was April. The Prison Healer. I was like, oh my God, if the whole series was published, I would just binge it. So I was desperate to read this, and honestly, so incredibly excited when I got approved for it. I can't really tell you much about the plot or the story because it would ruin the first one. But what I will say is, it's set in the wider world of whatever world the Prison Healer is set in. It's not set in the prison anymore. It's set in the wider, whatever. It's set outside. And one of my fears was going to be that it would get too detailed, too fantastical, too complex. Because this is fantasy and I don't normally read fantasy. And yeah, I was kind of worried that once it started talking about a lot more things that I would get lost. But that wasn't the case. It did feel right, this is going to sound crazy, but I want to sort of compare it to Harry Potter in that it was very similar to our world, just with odd bits thrown in there that you gradually learn about as the story goes on, rather than full on boom info dump of this crazy new world, and it all gets confusing. Now, with the first one, The Prison Healer, I absolutely adored, and I'm finding this in other books as well, that I really like this kind of trapped in, enclosed, small setting kind of feeling, where there's like, it just feels claustrophobic, like there's no escape. So obviously that didn't exist in this one, but it still was incredible. It was written so well. I still loved the characters that I loved previously. I was still invested in the story. It was really exciting, but you could tell that this book was very much a lead up to the next book. yeah, it definitely did feel like that. It felt like you couldn't have read it as a standalone, whereas you sort of could have read The Prison Healer as a standalone, but you wouldn't want to by the time you got to the last page. But yeah, so I still gave this 5 stars. I still absolutely adored it. Couldn't get enough, and now I'm desperately waiting for the third book that probably hasn't even been written yet, and I'm probably going to have to wait until 2022 for. So yeah, I'm a bit depressed about that. And that is all the books I'm going to tell you about today. So please let me know if you've actually read any of these that I've read and what you thought of them. And please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.